military.
I would like to drop truth bombs and not.
Okay, we're live. We're live, just so you know. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. I can't believe that I let Veterans Day go by without acknowledging not only all veterans, but vegan veterans, because I've done shows in past years, hence Patriotic Hat today. And as luck would have it, the guest that was scheduled today, which is a registered dietitian who has lost her voice, and I have to reschedule. I had somebody wonderful who was looking for a spot because he has a new book, Fill In. His name is Bill Muir. He's known as Sergeant Vegan, and he actually has a new book, and we're going to talk about it. And we're also going to talk about being vegan in the military. You know, that's why when people say, well, it's so hard to be vegan, I'm like, well, hear his story, because it ain't hard for you guys if you live in the United States and live in a city. Please welcome Bill Muir. Hey, Sergeant Vegan, do I salute you?
You can if you like. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, everyone. Sergeant Vegan here. Bill Muir. Great to be here. Great to talk about veganism.
Yeah, we almost met once. It's so funny because you spoke I used to live in the desert, and I believe you spoke
Arizona Veg Fest.
Not the Arizona. It was in Palm Desert, I believe.
Oh.
I almost am positive that we were two ships that passed in a night. I'm pretty sure you were there. Did you ever go to Indio, Palm Springs, Palm Desert, maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
Many times.
Okay, because I remember because you have the poster of the pig, and I remember seeing that. And I think I arrived and you had just left. So we had an opportunity to meet and we didn't. And then we lived in LA and we didn't, because you're still living in LA, right?
I live in LA, yeah.
Yeah, and you still live there. Well, that's amazing. Well, you have a great story, because I refer to you occasionally when people tell me, oh, it's so hard to be vegan, with all the wonderful vegan junk food and vegan restaurants, and it's so hard. And I'm really, because, I know a guy that did it on a tour of duty in Afghanistan, and he ate cornflakes with a canned fruit cocktail in it. And
yeah, that's part of the story, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I love your story, because it's one part of the story, you lost so much weight because you were basically starving, and then you got into the soy gelato, and then you gained some weight. So you experienced both sides of the spectrum.
Oh yeah. So I guess for the listeners and viewers who are not familiar with me, I'm Bill Muir, Sergeant Vegan. This year makes 30 years being vegan. I went vegan back in 1992 as a punk rock kid. How I got into veganism, I mean, pretty much like everybody, I stumbled into it and then realized that I had accidentally started to do something awesome being vegetarian. Got a hold of a PETA pamphlet talking about the dairy industry later, and I was like, hold on a second here. Being vegetarian isn't enough. If I'm eating cheese or using any kind of dairy product, I'm contributing to the same kind of death of those animals. And I realized it's really, veganism is a binary choice. Are you okay with animal suffering? Are you okay with paying money to people who are going to abuse animals? If the answer is yes, then, keep on what you're doing. If the answer is no, for me, it was no, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with destroying the planet and destroying the animals and, eating things that we don't need to eat and that aren't healthy. So I went vegan. And from there, there's been a lot of ups and downs. The military was definitely a lot of downs, as you would guess, for being vegan. The stuff that would be easy for most people was not easy for me. It was just really the food. Basic training for anyone who has thought about going in the military, who, whatever's whatever. Basic training is easy no matter what branch you do. My branch, the Army, because I wanted to be a paratrooper, I wouldn't say it's a joke, especially if you're not in shape, but it was at hardest annoying and sometimes fun. However, the food part was tough.
So do you think it's gotten any easier for people that are in the military now?
Thank you very much for asking. So currently I'm working with Mercy for Animals on a campaign to push the DoD, the Department of Defense, to have plant-based meals in DFACs or dining facilities, and to offer vegan MREs. The military, as it is, in every box of MREs, they come in this big industrial box, and of 12 MREs, or meals ready to eat, 2 are designated vegetarian, but not vegan. So we're pushing both to have those MREs, there's 2 in every box, to be vegan, and to have options in all dining facilities. I've seen dining facilities in my training that have had some options or have, I wouldn't say catered, but have had some stuff that's okay-ish. And then I've been in situations where I was back to the old cornflakes in fruit cocktail. And yeah, that's, if we're going to all agree that being able to eat is a human right, just like having a house over your head. And then if we're going to offer that to at least prisoners, then shouldn't we be doing the same bare minimum for our men and women in the armed services? I mean, if they're deciding to join the service to serve our country, shouldn't they at least be given something better than, fruit cocktail and cornflakes? I mean, I think so, personally.
I think so too. The nice comment from Jennifer says, "Hi, Bill. It was great spending time with you after the St. Louis Veg Fest the year before last." I'm curious though, do you happen to know if the food in the military is or was it any good, even when it wasn't vegan? Like how good is the food, or how bad is the food in the MREs? Like, do the people that aren't vegan complain about it, or do they say, "Wow, this is delicious"?
I would say most people don't like MREs. The MREs are meant for in the meal. Basically, what an MRE is, sure someone who was thinking about it could pull up a picture. It's this big plastic baggy thing, and in it, there's about 5 or 6, maybe 7 different components of everything that you would need in a meal. All of it adds up to about 2,000 calories, maybe 2,500 calories. The idea is that it's going to keep you going. It's supposed to be high carb, probably high protein fuel. It's also generally meant to be constipating because when you're on the go, you don't want to worry about the go. And not very vegan friendly. Though what I would end up doing is I would usually end up swapping stuff out, and I would get wheat snack bread and peanut butter. Or actually, when I was active duty, they had a vegan entree called the bean burrito. It was the number 12. I will remember that till my dying day, because I have every time I needed to eat an MRE, I would search out, hey, get me the bean burrito number 12. I would just get rid of the pound cake, and then the whole thing would be vegan. Was it good? I mean, no, I wouldn't. At no point am I right now in my civilian life thinking like, man, if I could just have one of those bean burritos, that would be great. No, that's never come up. Was it the worst thing I've ever had? For sure not. Like, I've eaten worse food, sometimes traveling. So I think what people kind of enjoyed about the MRE situation was usually if you're only eating them if you're in the field or in a tough training situation, that would be the time to sit down, kind of quote unquote, to smoke and joke with your buddies. You would usually trade stuff out and then kind of make like flavor combinations. Like people were trying to make pudding out of 3 different things in the MREs. As a vegan, I wasn't doing any of that. I was just basically fiddling around with the other MREs to get enough food for myself. And as a medic, I was usually checking on the other guys before I was even doing that. So I didn't really have the same experience with it.
Wow. Are there any like Orthodox Jews in the military? Like, I'm just curious because, and do they get kosher?
100%. There's a representation of any ethnicity, any gender, any religion, anything you can think of. It exists in the military. And
do they get kosher food, for example, if they're in the military?
I think if you have a religious exemption, you generally are going to get, and it's going to be easier to have that push that religious exemption or medical, you basically get to supersede anything that the people are telling you. That being your supervisors or whoever, your sergeant or whoever's in charge of you. Not as much as vegan, because that vegan just becomes we're just being finicky eaters. I think when we eventually get to put veganism in a protected class, just like religion, or if we made the vegan MREs, we got rid of the vegan word, called it plant-based, and then we made it kosher, halal, gluten-free, dairy-free, and then the problem when you add too many frees on it is it ends up becoming taste-free too. But I think if we could at least make it kosher, halal, and vegan, and we could make it a religious meal that it doesn't contain any meat or dairy, and I think that would be an angle as well.
Have you ever contacted any companies like Leafside, or because I think that if they could make it delicious, people would eat it despite its being vegan.
For sure, yeah, I totally agree with that. So right now the issue is I don't believe it's an issue of can it be made, because the vegetarian MREs that were there were like pasta with vegetables that had, I think, a very small percentage of egg whites. Or at one point they had after I got out and was in the reserve, I know they had a veggie burger that wasn't vegan that also, I think it contained eggs or milk or something, probably some like Morningstar stuff or it can definitely be done. It's not an issue of can it be done. It's more of an issue of getting the people, our kind of slow moving government, to kind of say like, okay, well, we'll do that. And the unfortunate thing is usually change is very slow, like molasses. And then all of a sudden it's like, this needs to be done yesterday. Why hasn't this started?
Wow. The people that make the food in the military, are they actual trained culinary professionals, or do they just join the military and then they get assigned to work?
So it all depends on the scenario they're in. Usually the people that work in the dining facilities are two types of people. One, it's someone who that's their job. That's their, what we would call MOS. They're a cook. Then in the basic training and other kind of scenarios like that, they press gang people who are currently in basic training to work in those facilities. And anybody who's gone through basic training has had to spend some time working in the dining facility. Usually you're basically like, just to go for telling you, they'd say, hey, do this, do that, little things like that. Then bigger bases, especially when you're deployed, it won't be actual cooks at all. Usually that was KBR or some other kind of like Halliburton. Some company is basically paid by the government. And usually the food is a little better, but I don't remember it being super vegan friendly either, but definitely better than the regular dining facility. And then I was on a forward operating base. That in that scenario, that was basically a couple Marines that were not cooks that were just told to start cooking. They were given a book of recipes and some big cans, industrial cans, and start making stuff. There was like the quality would be, I would say, very subpar. Like even the stuff they weren't making, the bagels and stuff, to be fair, they had to fly it in, but stale bagels and kind of like not really good looking fruit, like you weren't going to have a great meal there, and no one was really expecting that.
Well, the thing is if you guys are defending our country, you would think that you would need good nourishment. Like that should be kind of a priority. Obviously,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you're in the field doing battle, you can't expect, like 5-star meals at that point. I understand. But when you're in training and stuff, you would think that you would require and deserve the best nutritious food.
That's why I think, especially nowadays, where a good portion of our young people, I'm not even talking about, I'm Generation X, very proud member of Generation X. I'm not even talking about millennials. Millennials are now moving toward being too old to actually join. I'm talking about Gen Z. A good portion of Gen Z now, what's the percentage? I don't know, but I think it's at least 10 to 20% are identifying as vegan or plant-based or at least vegetarian. If we're going to get our best and brightest in the military, shouldn't we say that, hey, at least if you're eating ethically in that fashion, that you should be able to join the service? A majority of people who join are people like me who join to serve their country because they want to help the country, want to do something bigger than their life, and to then exclude our best and brightest, because let's face it, I mean, not to toot our own horn, but vegans are the best and the brightest. We're going to say that these people can't join or make it really, really hard and have all these roadblocks and stuff. I just think it's kind of very short-sighted on the Department of Defense's part. And to get with the times, I think it's about time they got with the times.
Is it true? I think I read or saw something once that they're having a harder time getting people to join all the ranks of the military in general, but also that a lot of the people, because we've become such an obesogenic nation, that they can't even meet the minimum requirement, that they're like too heavy. Is there a weight requirement for the military?
Yes, there is a height weight requirement. But some of that's a little outdated, to be fair to people who might not pass that, because it doesn't account for the fact that people who spend a lot of time lifting weights and are in very, very good shape are not going to fit the classic 1940s body type composition where, you know, to be fit was just someone who could run a little bit, and nobody was actually lifting weights and building mass of them, except for a few, you know, famous old-timey bodybuilders. Nowadays, the height and weight standard, again, if you're somebody who spends a lot of time in the gym and lifting and that's your thing, you're probably going to have to be, what by taped, I mean, they're going to check they're going to, you know, do a tape around you, a circumferential around your waist and around your neck, and just basically show that the reason why you're this weight to this height is because you're a bodybuilder and not because you're overweight. And it totally makes sense why they need people to hit certain standards and be at certain weights. They're going to, a bare minimum in basic training, you're running a lot. You're doing push-ups, you're doing sit-ups. If you're not in the spot where you can do that kind of stuff, how are you going to actually make it through basic training? Basic training is called basic training just for that. It's the bare minimum. Like that should not be considered the standard of what you are as a soldier. That's the bare minimum to be able to do these tasks. Because yet another thing I like about the Marine Corps and think that they're doing great in the Marine Corps, every man and woman is first a rifleman and someone that's going to be able to shoot. Now with the Army, especially, I went through basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. If you went through like Relax in Jackson or somewhere else, like, you know, would you be able to be at that same standard? Maybe, maybe not, but you should still be at a bare minimum standard. So I don't think we can relax the standards anymore. And I think we do need people to at least be able to do the bare minimum. So yeah, it is troublesome that people are, you know, nowadays there's people who are maybe more obese than they were in the past, but it's a weird dichotomy in our society. We have people who are, yes, more obese than they've ever been in the history of the planet. But at the same time, we have more people who are more in shape than probably any other time on the planet. Like the prevalence of gyms, that didn't exist 30 years ago. The prevalence of people who lift weights or do CrossFit for fun, the people, you know, I've run a couple marathons in my time, and I'm proud of that. Nowadays, people are doing ultra marathons or they're doing Ironmans. It's kind of an interesting thing, and they both exist at the same time.
Wow. So you decided, what's really interesting to me, well, a lot of interesting things about your story is that you actually joined the military after 9/11, which like, I'm thinking like, that's not when most people choose to join, right?
Well, it depends. If you're joining for college, then no, I think if you looked at a graph, the worst time to join would be at a time of war if you're joining specifically for college. But I already had a degree. I was living in Japan. I was an English teacher. I was doing music and some other things. And when our country got attacked, and I saw that live on TV, but in Japan, it really affected me. And it made me think, this is time to do something outside myself. This is a time to do something for the greater good. And I thought, if, you know, I don't know how I feel politically about this, where I don't know how I feel about us bombing all these people in Afghanistan, because I'm sure it's not a controversial thought to say not everyone that gets hurt in war is a bad guy. Like, in fact, most of the people that lost their lives, I think on a whole, were just innocent civilians caught in it. So I thought, if I could be a medic, if I could go and hands-on be able to do something to actually make the world a better place, then wouldn't that be kind of the reason why I went vegan too, to make the world a better place? And for me, it just kind of made sense. And
did you have to go to, like, because you have to go to training to be in the military.
Yeah.
Did you have to go to different and separate training to be the medic?
Sure. So my training pipeline, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the infantry for basic training. Then from Fort Benning, Georgia, I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, kind of outside San Antonio. And I spent 4 months there becoming a medic. Then right back to Benning for airborne school. And then I went to the 173rd, and I lived in Italy for a year doing training and then eating lots of soy gelato and vegan pizza, and then did my year in Afghanistan.
Wow. I'm curious because you work in a hospital now. It's funny how all your jobs are in places that don't seem to have the best food.
Zing. Yeah, no, the food for our patients is, I would say, substandard. And I don't have a problem at all about creating some waves with that. The government cheats on the veterans whenever they can. And to be fair, if we're going to think, bipartisanly about it, it just comes down to money. It costs money. And often the veterans are, while we're a big voting bloc, it's not like there's going to be a whole bunch of money that's going to come back if you give some homeless vets better care, versus where they spend the money on a corporation or give tax breaks to, whoever, whatever. They'll get something out of it. Whereas, the vets, doing better by the VA, they probably don't see the money back. And I get it. However, we are, as a population, a group that generally has more instances of homelessness, suicide, and depression. It's, the number, if you look at the numbers and percentages, it's not great.
So when did you have time to write a book?
Well, thank you very much for asking. The pandemic was in a particularly rotten time to work in a hospital. And I wrote actually 2 books in the pandemic. In the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote The Adventures of Sergeant Piggy, which you can see up on the wall, but here, that's there too. I wanted to bring light and peace and happiness to kids, because the pandemic was a kind of a lousy time for kids. I think everybody was affected, but if you're a kid, you're getting pulled out of school, you're not seeing your friends as much, everybody's stranger danger. And that must have been really hard. I think a lot of adults actually, the pandemic was stressful, but a lot of people got to work from home, got to not go into work. There was a big advantage for a lot of people, not anyone like me who worked in a hospital. Toward the end of the pandemic, however, I'm hoping we're calling it over, but toward the end, when it started to get more bleak, and as you can imagine, dealing with all the death and awfulness that we saw on the daily with COVID, and then just all that, it made me want to write something a little bit more, I guess, timely. Dead Meat wasn't meant to be super timely, but as things progressed and how the weird turns the last administration went, and it just seemed kind of like, basically, I would put it like this. I put all the positivity and wonderfulness and all the dreams and hopes I had for humanity in The Adventures of Sergeant Piggy, something for kids to brighten their day and show them how great the world is in the travel. And I wanted to really be able to reflect the evil and awfulness of the animal agriculture, and how everyday people are destroying themselves and the planet and killing animals for no reason, and all just seeming like this is normal and this is the way it has to be. And that's what Dead Meat is. It's meant to be a mirror up to the very thing that I think is destroying our world, and people just continue to just see this as a necessary thing when it couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah. Did I hear correctly in an interview I was listening to that you, at one point, you wanted to open a restaurant, and did you go to culinary school?
Thank you very much for asking. Yes, that is correct. So I went to a Seventh-day Adventist culinary program in Lancaster, Massachusetts, called the Atlantic Union College. I'm not sure if that place still exists, because, it's been now like 10, 13 years since I graduated. 14 years since I graduated from that. So I graduated around 2008. And for anyone who's not very young listening, everybody knows 2008 was like when our economy collapsed and things were, it would have been the worst time in our history to open up a restaurant. And so I ended up going back into the medical field after working at a couple restaurants. I I volunteered in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. And it made me think, something I really enjoy doing is being able to help people. It's not enjoyable in the way that like, yay, life is enjoyable. It's more enjoyable in the way that you knew that there was a point to waking up and you did something worthwhile. And I wanted that feeling, and I wanted to feel like it all meant something. And I feel like, working in Haiti helped me do that. So I transitioned to becoming a nursing assistant, and then I became an RN. But around 2014, 15, I started to think like, why did I spend all the time to make a restaurant if I wasn't going to do it? And shouldn't I take all that knowledge and put it somewhere? And that's where my first book, Vegan Strong, came about, which I'm very proud of. It's the least hippie vegan book ever written. It was meant to be a vegan book written like an army field manual, just the facts, recipes, how to go vegan and be vegan strong.
I love it. So do you ever see yourself being a culinary professional? And by the way, I did Google it, and that school has closed.
I'm not at all surprised. There's a lot of great things about, there was a lot of great things about that school, and the program was excellent, but they did a very poor job of recruiting students. And the way I found out about that program is, when you do a Google search for something, many, many different pages come up. And most normal people, including myself now, but most normal people will just look at the first couple entries, maybe the second page. I think I made it to page 25 when I found that program, because I was like, I just put in Vegan Culinary Program. And I was like, I have time. I'm just sitting here in front of a computer. I just kept pressing forward. And finally it came up. I was like, this exists. And they were doing anything they could to not promote it. And it was just, it was really good, but I don't think they understood the gold mine that they had there. And for those watching who, Seventh-day Adventist and Seventh-day Adventist book centers are a great place to find vegan food. And sometimes it's going to beat prices that are they're going to beat the prices of places that you're normally going to. And there's some products like McKay's vegan chicken seasoning that you could really only find there or on Amazon. It's something I don't think I knew until I knew. I was like, oh my goodness, this is wonderful.
Cool. Do you ever use your culinary prowess in your daily life? And like, do you take you work the night shift. So do you even eat on the night shift? Because I always heard that night shift can be difficult for people, especially people struggling with weight and things, because, you're.
Yes. So night shift, more so, I think, than almost any other way of living, you have to have structure if you're going to make it through without gaining probably a vast amount, an unfavorable amount of weight. So the way I made night shift work for me, besides the fact that we do get like a night shift differential, and the big bonus is not having to drive through traffic, but because it's generally a little quieter than day shift and there's a little less movement, I'm generally able to get my break. So I we have a gym, which is probably the biggest perk of my job. So I go to the gym for about 45 minutes, and I do that every day I work, which now I only have to work 3 days a week. So every day that I'm at work, I go to the gym. Then I only go to my gym, my 24-hour fitness here about 3 days a week. So it kind of works for me that at work I'm working out, and then of course I have to do a chest day a separate day, a leg day a separate day, but bis, tris, back and shoulders I got in the bag there. So my eating pattern is different depending on if I have a work shift or if I'm just a day like today where I'm not going to work. If I'm going to work, usually I'll wake up around 1600 or 4 p.m. I'll drink a liter of water, then I'll wait an hour, then I'll drink a protein shake. Then I'll have dinner, then I'll go to work, and I'll have with me in my bag, I'll have another protein shake, a couple protein bars, kind of like fruit and nut mix, a banana, an apple. That's kind of about it. And I'll just eat that throughout the rest of the night. I haven't pretty much out of sheer laziness. I haven't really tabbed up the amount of calories that I'm eating, but I'm generally probably right at my expenditure. Maybe I'm slightly over, but not by that much. And one of the default ways that vegan has helped is that people bring in trashy garbage food all the time, whether it's cookies, cake, or candy, and 99.9% of the time, it's not vegan. So my aunt worked nights in a law firm, and her not being vegan meant that she was succumbing. If she wasn't going to a candy machine, she was eating bad food during the night. And I don't think that you can't eat that food ever as long as it's vegan. A piece of cake every now and again doesn't hurt you. I don't think that we should think of veganism or just general life as never eating things that you enjoy. But, there's nothing healthy about cakes, and that should be a once in a while thing and not an everyday thing. So being able to just not eat any of that, not drink any of that. Generally, I'll have my coffee black. I don't like soda that much. It just makes it easier.
Well, it's nice when people, because I've heard so much from people in general that work in the hospital about all the crap that's brought in. It's in the break room. When somebody's an ethical vegan, it does make it easier because at least they're not going to eat the crap that's not vegan. And it seems like, most of it is, right? Candies, cookies, C's candies.
Yeah, and sometimes, very occasionally, something vegan will come through there, and I'll just have to read it a couple times. Then I'm sure everyone who's had to read too many labels this happened to them. I'll take a picture of it, and then I'll enlarge it, and I'll say like, "Well, this really is vegan." And by that time, someone's either eaten it, or then I've decided like I'm going to eat all these, and I'll just like Cookie Monster my way through it. But it doesn't happen very often. I usually, if we're doing a potluck, I'll try to bring in something like I have a banana bread recipe in my book, but I also will sometimes cheat and do Trader Joe's banana bread, or I'll bring Trader Joe's banana bread. I'll veganize Trader Joe's box mix and then make that. Something simple like that people will, still say, "Oh, I didn't know that you could make this vegan." Like, well, surprise, it's like 2022. Like,
I didn't know Trader Joe's had a vegan banana bread.
They do. They both have the loaf and they have the box mix. I'll do both, but I'll do the box mix more often because with the box mix, if you add bananas to it instead of eggs, and then basically make it the same way with just a little bit more water, you have a very flavorful loaf. It feels, it looks like you made it yourself. And I mean, I guess you kind of mixed it up and put it in the oven yourself. And it's very easy. I mean, I could rock one of those out in 45 minutes, start to finish, and make it to work. After COVID though, wanting to be in an enclosed space with other people, like, almost that close to touching distance in the same break room at the same time, like it's killed my vibe to want to be in potlucks with anybody. And similarly to not even moving on from COVID, flu season, I did not get the flu shot this year. I'm kind of tired of shots, but the other thing about it is, usually it's processed with eggs. Now you can get a flu mist that doesn't have that, but my work wasn't offering that. And they said, well, if you don't get the shot, then you have to wear a mask. Well, I'm completely cool with that. I will wear the mask. Let's do that.
Well, it seems like most professionals in most hospitals are wearing masks, whether they got the shot or not.
Which, it's crazy that it took so long for that to be a thing. Like, yeah, it was kind of a weird adjustment because I was used to only if I was going in an isolation room, put on a mask. And then for a while, and then I was in that group of people who would just wear this like neck gaiter to work, which that didn't offer any protection. But now that I'm in, it's just like anything. And I think in a lot of ways, for people that are worried that vegan was going to be too much of a change, it's similar to that. in the beginning, when you do something different, whether it's wake up early in the morning, eat plant-based, start an exercise routine, or in this case, wear a mask at work, it's kind of a shock. It's something different. You're like, oh no, change, scary change. But after you start to do it, you're like, hey, this is really not a thing. You're going to figure out a way to make it work for you. And then you do it.
Thanks. Monarch has a question. Do you
All
add
right.
protein powder to your shakes, or do you just use whole foods?
So, what does she mean by using whole foods? Like I would put,
I don't know, like throw in some lentils maybe or something. Like how do you make your shakes or smoothies?
some tofu. Oh yeah, yes. Thank you very much for that question. Protein shakes with protein powder. I'm not. Should I grab the brand that I have right now, or
Yeah, if you like,
yeah,
sure.
give me 1 second. I'll give them a shout out.
Sure. Hey guys, I just want you to know that if you're interested in the brand new plant-based bundle, I've been posting the link both in the show notes and the chat, and we have a 2 p.m. show today. Plantiful Kiki is going to talk about sustainable weight loss.
This is what I've been using lately. This is Zhou, ZHOU. They sponsored the Vegan Strong team, that vegan strength team that I'm a member of. I think those guys are wonderful, and I think this stuff, our sponsor stuff, is great too. But I think any vegan protein that you use, that you like, that works for you, will be good. Generally speaking, though, I wouldn't waste your time with anything less than 20 grams in a protein shake, because if the whole point of it is to get protein, and then you're doing a whole bunch of carbs, and I don't think carbs are bad. I'm not going that direction. I'm just saying, like, if you end up just drinking some calories and it's not extra protein, then what was the point? So I'll probably do a scoop and a half of this, and get 30 grams of protein. Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to, put on muscle, it's going to be about calories. It's going to be about protein.
Yeah. Eva says, as an Army veteran, I'm pleased to see a vegan in the military show. Actually, we've done a couple, believe it or not. You can search this page. I'd like to add that I received my health care from the VA and I receive excellent care. There has been progress.
Oh, thank goodness. I love hearing stuff like that. And occasionally I do hear good stuff. I think sometimes it might just be my VA that's I'm in Santa Monica, which you would think is super bougie capital, but we're in this weird in between where Santa Monica, it is that, but it's also the quote unquote home of the homeless. So I just think that because not enough people are advocating for those veterans, they kind of skimp on it. And the biggest way they skimp on it is with staff. So we're poorly staffed most of the time. But I get it. I mean, nobody wants to pay taxes, and it comes down to money, right? But I'm glad that her situation is good, because the VA all over the country is going to be different in every scenario, in every situation.
Are rations the same as MREs? Are they different?
Different. Oh, hold on 1 second. My computer's not plugged in for some reason.
Oh, the reason I asked.
There we go. We're good.
Okay, there's a question if any of the rations are vegan.
So I think by ration, that's what they're referring to. That's generally, so when you're in the field, there's a couple different scenarios on ways that you would get food. One, you would personally carry in food, and it's usually going to be in the situation where you've opened your MRE bag, you take just the stuff that you're going to need, and that's on like a 2 or 3 day, you might have enough food for yourself. But if you're staying for any length of time, for example, I was in Afghanistan during Operation Red Wings, where if you saw Lone Survivor, where the SEALs were in the situation, they had a lot of support that came in to kind of help them. And I was one of a bazillion other men and women out there helping. But to do that, we basically sat in the field for 2 weeks. It was a dangerous field, but we were sitting in the field and doing that kind of stuff. So at a certain point, you ran out of food, and they would come and resupply us. And with that, in that scenario, it's just boxes of MREs. We would often call them Mr. E's. because you never know what you're getting when you just open a box of MREs and meals ready to eat.
She's saying the ration packs, which are sealed and for emergency use.
Those are MREs.
Those are MREs. Okay.
The reason why there's a distinction between that and rats, we have something called T-rats, which might stand for troop rats. I never knew them as anything else. They would come in these big containers, and they would be stuff that was made in a dining facility, kind of industrially, and usually none of that was vegan. It would be basically like pasta with meat sauce, and I take that back. Usually there was some side lettuce, like a salad it'd be like mostly lettuce with a few drizzle little pieces of cucumber and or carrot. You're not going to really get full on that. But that would only be if we were in the quote unquote field, meaning we were training, but it's not during wartime. Wartime, in my experience, was 100% MREs.
Okay, let's see. Did you know that, I mean, they're not vegan, but did you know that M&Ms were invented for the military a long time ago?
That I didn't know, but
well, because chocolate, you see, because they had the candy coating. And so, that thing about melt in your mouth, not in your hands, they were inspired by rations that were given to soldiers during the Spanish Civil War in 1932, because what was happening is, if you have like a candy bar, like a Hershey bar in your pocket, it's going to melt, right? But the M&Ms, the soldiers could keep in their pockets.
Well, I know that there's a vegan version of that. Unreal has a vegan peanut M&M clone, but don't you guys think it's about time that M&M have a vegan M&M?
I agree. And it said the original milk chocolate M&M was the brainchild of Forrest Mars, created in 1949 exclusively for the U.S. service members deployed overseas during World War II. So because chocolate was part of the rations, I agree with you why they can't make because even if somebody's not a vegan, so many people are allergic to dairy. So why not have a dairy-free? The reason they're not vegan is because of the dairy.
Yeah, I really do think that, rebranding vegan to just calling it plant-based and calling it dairy-free, and then just having, publicizing it that way. I really do think that that vegans sometimes kind of create some of their own problems with how we go about kind of evangelizing veganism and talking about it. I think for a long time we were framing our own movement in a way that was not likely to get enough traction. And now just saying like, hey, it's better for yourself, better for the planet, better for the animals. Like, here's some sexy vegans. Like, let's move on with this. I think it's going to be almost always a better way of doing it than my first 10 years as a punk rock kid just yelling meat is murder at somebody, and that made people when they think vegan, unfortunately, that's the things that they think of when they go, ew, vegan. Like unfortunately, it was us back in the day, like a majority of us, we weren't, talking about this in the way that was most media savvy, and companies really hadn't caught up the way they are now, having things that are super deliciously tempting, like whether it's a Beyond thing or, all these Silk or all these other companies.
Are you still doing music? You are very, you're like a Renaissance man. You're always going to be able to get a job because you can be a soldier, you can be a medic, you can be a nurse, you can be a chef, you can be a musician. You're very hireable.
Well, thank you for saying so. So I made the mistake when I was in Japan of having some success with music. And unfortunately, success is addictive. So I did this song for video games, which probably anybody who's not around like my age or our age might not have heard of, but there was a song Final Fantasy for the Final Fantasy X soundtrack that I did the vocals on. The game sold 14 million copies, and it had, every now and again when I go to YouTube and kind of like troll YouTube, there's still like millions of views on that song. And because I joined the service right after, because that came out right around 9/11 and when I left Japan and joined the military, I didn't really get to do stuff that I would want to with that, and I missed it. So I think had I not had that success with that song, I think I would have been able to just say like, yeah, okay, like let's leave it alone. It didn't work out. So I guess I'm still chasing that. So yeah, I'm still in a band. Hopefully, eventually we'll put out some vegan rock and roll for you guys.
Well, let me know. That sounds great. I'd love to hear your stuff. I see a question from Joyce. I don't know if it was meant for you or me, but I'll ask it. Are your books self-published? Because some of mine are and some of mine aren't. I do both. So
yes, one of the wonderful things about living in 2022 is companies like Amazon. Now, most of us have like our feelings either way about Amazon, and and I'll agree in a lot of ways. I'm sure they're the great Satan and whatever. But back in the day, if you wanted to put out a book, for one reason or another, it would just be very difficult, and you would end up probably making it a Kinko's copy or something like that, and you have to do a knock on the door to door and be like, hey, would you like to read my book about veganism? With Vegan Strong, I shopped Vegan Strong around to a bunch of publishers, but at the time, since it was, lately vegans had a boom. At this point, it was 2018 when I put it out. I was shopping around as early as 2016, 17. The fact that I was specifically not making it hippie, and that I was very, trying to make it like uber mainstream and military. Most of the publishers, like Vegan Publisher and publishers and stuff like that, just were not into that. It was because, unfortunately, at that point, a lot of the vegans were more traditionally hippie at that point. Dead Meat, similarly, it's a horror novel about veganism, but there's no recipes in it. It was kind of a hard sell. I think the advantage of using Amazon or whatever platform is that if you have an idea and you have a passion, and you can actually make it happen, and you can have people all over the world read it, and then we'll let the market decide. I've sold lots of copies of Vegan Strong and Dead Meat and Sergeant Piggy, not enough that I can live off of. I joke that I make about $1,000 a year, and I just have to write 97 more books, and I'll have enough income to be able to live off of. Maybe sometime by 2300 I'll be there.
Well, it seems like whatever you do, you're always helping people. I'm curious, as a nurse, because if you're working at night, I would imagine most of your patients are probably sleeping or trying to sleep, right?
Well, you would think, but so there's a couple things that happen when usually people don't come into the hospital for one thing. And when they do, it's like, you're like, oh my goodness, a person who knows who they are, where they are, what's happening, can walk to the bathroom, and you just have heart issues. Like, oh, you wonderful unicorn, you don't have skin issues. You haven't been, in our healthcare system for 25 years straight. You could walk. Like, it's amazing. But most of my patients are not that. Most of my patients are, they have about 72 comorbidities. They can't walk. They have heart issues, lung issues. They have diabetes. They're, and on top of that, deep-rooted mental illness. And they've been stuck in this situation so long that, day, night, afternoon, they might be sleeping, they might be awake. Usually, there's no windows often, so they don't know, should I be awake? Should I be asleep? And your body, even if you're not in that situation, if you're just in a situation where we're waking you up to take your vitals every 4 hours, sooner or later, you're like, oh man, I don't know when I should sleep. I don't know if I could go back to sleep. So my patients, most of the time, like last week, I did have kind of an amazing, people were there just for medical issues, and we're almost like, hey, just leave me alone and I'll see you in the morning. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But so I can't, recent memory, 2 good nights. But usually I have 5 patients who either have psych issues and they have someone sitting with them to make sure they don't hurt themselves or hurt others, or get up and fall on their face or pull out like a nasal gastral tube or something. So usually my patients are up partying all night.
Right. So you're not really able to like say, hey, if you ate a little better, you wouldn't have had a heart attack. You're not really able to communicate.
Very occasionally I do. And if someone asks, I'll go through it with them. I mean, to be fair though, a lot of the patients that I see and the timing of it don't often lead for those conversations. And, if I'll often say there's like a pyramid of need. If someone's currently, trying to get clean from drugs, that's not necessarily the best time to also change their diet. Like maybe first get off of meth, and then, after that, once you're clean and sober, then we can figure out other ways to fix your life. Or if my main concern is just to have Mr. Smith not fall on his face, which I have a lot of nights where the family doesn't want this guy tied down. We don't have the staff, so I can't have someone sitting watching him. I got patients all over this area, and just every hour, but not at the exact time, he just springs up out of bed because he thinks he's in 1952 and wants to go whatever. Usually those are more my problems. But occasionally someone will ask, occasionally I'll have a vegetarian or a vegan patient. I'll be like, whoa, let me hear your story. But, it doesn't always happen like that. It's nice though when it is. I mean, I would love to have more of that and less of, what I currently do. But, maybe Sergeant Vegan's stuck in a rut and it's time for a change. I don't know.
Well, doctors generally don't visit at night. I mean, maybe if it's an emergency. So do you ever have able to interact with them to like talk about veganism, or your coworkers?
Coworkers occasionally will, and it'll be a weird, like I personally, I don't keep me being vegan on the down low at all. It's very clear. Like my car is, if you guys ever have the pleasure of seeing the Vegan mobile, it's very obviously vegan. It's not just a sticker or two. It's like over the top, and it's meant to be over the top. I don't think if we need to get people's attention about this, then just a little bit of like low key, hey, vegan, I don't think works. And often if I'm wearing something or have something on it, I have it on my coffee mug, and obviously all the food I'm eating. And a lot of my coworkers are overweight, and sometimes they'll ask about it. It's a fine line between telling people facts and then going overboard. So usually if they ask, I answer, but if they don't, I don't.
Is the cafeteria even open during your shift?
The cafeteria is not. And during the night, for the patients, if they ask for something, usually what we have in the refrigerator is, at best case scenario, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or graham crackers, or mixed fruit, which reminds me of the mixed fruit I put with my cornflakes. And don't try that at home, kids. It's not good.
You're funny. Let's see. I saw a question from Bulliant about protein powder. Do you believe that we have to have that for bodybuilders have to have that? Because some of the bodybuilders,
so the early bodybuilders like Schwarzenegger back in the day, when he hit those titles, and he was eating a crazy amount of food and mostly protein, and obviously very little of it was plant-based. Animal-based foods have one advantage, which is also a disadvantage, but if you're trying to get big, it has this advantage. Animal-based food is very dense, calorically dense, and it's also very dense with protein. It's also very dense with cholesterol, and it's destroying the planet and rotting our bodies. But it has that. So you were going to have to eat, if you're doing it natural and if you're avoiding protein powder, which is basically kind of a cheat to get that amount of protein that you need to build muscle optimally, you're then going to need to front load seitan, tofu, I would say after that, nuts, maybe lentils on top of that. And you could do it, but it would just be harder. The protein powder, it's just a cheap way to be able to make all that protein happen. Because like when bodybuilders would drink a whole bunch of eggs, why are they drinking the eggs? Well, first, because they thought that it was healthier that drinking them or eating them raw. But the other thing was it's just easier to drink something than eating, the physical act of chewing when you're trying to get something down. So 30 grams of protein drank, it won't feel to me like I drank 400 calories. If you ate the same thing, your body would tell you you're full. So if I'm trying to yoke up, I'm going to need to do that. And before we had this great, delicious vanilla, when I was in Japan and also Afghanistan at one point, I was drinking unflavored because that was the only vegan I could find. Truly awful. What I would say for that is it would be like a twofer, and that it also gave me an ab workout because I would try to drink it before it wanted to come up. So I would have to clench my stomach and force it down. And it was like a race to the finish. So I really think we're living in the best era for veganism on so many ways. And I'm sure, the next generation is going to be even more awesome. But yeah, I would say if you're trying to pack on muscle and vegan, obviously I would do that. I mean, that's kind of almost a no-brainer.
A question from a live viewer: if you eat oil?
Do I eat oil? So I will usually use a fat-free cooking spray when I'm frying stuff, or a little bit of olive oil drizzled on it. Oil is great for you in many ways. Obviously, you need to get fat. It's part of our main three macros. And on top of that, well, it tastes good. And another use of it is if you're trying to put on weight, which there is a lot of people who, if for one reason or another, they're vegan, they're trying to put on weight, adding a little something super fatty to your foods, fat is very calorically dense. That'll be great for you. In my case, I'm trying to kind of rock right at the edge of what I'm burning calorically and what I need to eat to put on muscle. So I'm not necessarily in a deficit like my friend Corinne is always talking about being in that deficit, that's why he always looks cut year round. I'm not pushing myself to be on a deficit. I think if I made enough money through all this and I only, bless you.
Thank you.
I didn't need to, go to work, then maybe I would do it. But right now I'm kind of in a surplus, but I try not to be in too much of a surplus. And therefore things that I can cut out of my diet, like extra oil, like junky food, like sugar soda. I will cut that stuff out. At one point I also cut out coffee creamer, but now silk coffee creamer is just so delicious, and I'm a sucker for delicious coffee in the morning. So
what does your shirt mean?
So thank you very much for asking. I just got this shirt this is an Earth Crisis shirt. I'm going to show you the back. I'm hoping you're able to see the back. Can you see the back?
Yeah, vegan for the animals.
Yeah. So this is a band called Earth Crisis, which they did, for viewers who are not familiar with Earth Crisis, they were from a similar scene that I was from, and they helped to popularize veganism in the 90s in the heavy music sphere. They played Ozfest and gave out PETA pamphlets and stuff like that. So for anyone who hasn't heard of Earth Crisis, who likes heavier music, I mean, these guys were amazing. And if you don't know what that is, that's a reference to Animal Liberation Front, until every cage is empty, that kind of stuff. They're absolutely amazing. And, I can't say enough great things about them. And I think the DIY attitude, DIY, do it yourself. If there's something that you think that should be out there, you're like me, when I thought, hey, I think there needs to be a book that's kind of written like an Army field manual, but it's pushing veganism for this, for a group of people who might not normally see, the vegan community really speaking to them. Do it. The world is unlimited possibilities of anything, both good and bad, and it's up to us to make it better, and it's up to us to create new cool things. Because if we're not going to do it, who's going to do it?
Yep, exactly. Here is a question from Susanna. She says, does Sergeant Vegan have a YouTube channel? I feel like he's so easy to listen to and could easily carry his own channel. Lots of interesting experiences make up his story.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I originally started on YouTube in 2008. I was working at a vegan restaurant called Seed Kitchen in Venice, and went on
Wait,
a
for
bunch
Eric,
of,
for Eric LeChasseur?
yeah. Oh,
Oh
you
my
know him
God,
too?
he's like a good friend of mine.
I have next time you see him, I haven't seen him in years, but could you tell him Bill said hi? Him and his wife and her story, you know, beating cancer and all that, and everything that she's been through. I think the two of them are amazing. But you know how it is when you change jobs. But they, you know, working with him, like it was just awesome. But anyway, to answer the question, I'm Vegan Road Trip on YouTube. When Instagram and Facebook started to get more popular, and this is the problem about being moving into the category that could be considered old, because I'm going to be 50 next tax day. So I guess, I don't know. I'm thinking middle age for me might be 60, but that would mean that I would live to 120. Anyway, I now use the Sergeant Vegan more, SGT_Vegan on Instagram, and I do a video once a week. I'm also on Facebook, and I'll basically put the videos there. And as you could guess, like all the kids, I'm doing the TikToks as well.
You are doing TikTok. Cool.
I am on TikTok as well. And my algorithm is just so weird. And I'm sure everybody's is, but mine is like left-leaning progressive politics, then military stuff that looks like it's like, you know, like you're showing some 18-year-old, you know, jumping out of planes. Then probably because the military stuff, guns, and then puppy dog and kitty videos, and like, you know, uber cute. And then because I used to live in Japan, then like just random life in Japan stuff. And yeah, maybe Italy, because I love Italy too.
You're an interesting person. Listen,
Well,
and I mean that as a compliment, because sometimes you say, well, you're interesting. No, you really are. You're very easy to talk to. Every guest on this show, Bill, gets the question what they eat in a day. And I'd love to hear it from you, because since you work nights, it might look a little different. Because
I already gave you guys my night. So my day when do you
sleep? First, tell me when is your sleeping time?
So I have a very, I would say probably atypical sleeping pattern. So 3 days a week, because I work nights 3 days. Those days I'm kind of on this weird sleeping pattern. So on days like today. So today is a non-work day. Today I slept 8 hours. I woke up at 8. I ate tofu scramble. So I had 2 vegan English muffins, courtesy of Trader Joe's. Tofu scramble, which made with McKay's seasoning, tofu, and kind of breaking with tradition. I do my tofu scramble with broccoli, because I think broccoli is, I don't like the term superfood because I think it's overused, but I think broccoli is amazing and people should eat the heck out of it.
I like it too. It's good.
It's so freaking good. And if people are wondering, well, broccoli and this, that, and then, you know, Trader Joe's has a pound of frozen broccoli for $1.69. If you're not eating it, it's in your freezer. It's not going bad. You take it out, 2 minutes, microwave with some water on it, defrosted, ready to go. And I'll do some Beyond sausages with that for extra protein. So usually front loading the morning with maybe 30, 40 grams of protein. Then lunch, I may have lunch, or I may do a protein shake. I go back and forth with that. You know, anytime I can kind of cut some calories, but still get protein, I'll do it. Then dinner, I'll probably do up dinner because I'm not going to work. If I was going to work, which usually some days I will work, I would be doing a protein shake. I would be doing a protein shake for lunch, then dinner, eating dinner. Then I'll bring food with me. Come back from work at 8:30 in the morning, asleep by 9:15 in the morning, wake up at 1600 thereabouts, 4:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Then I would do a liter of water, do the protein shake again, and it's kind of a monotonous cycle, but I don't think I've gained that much weight from it. And weirdly, my cardio, because I have like a hip issue and I'm eventually going to get hip surgery, not doing cardio and just lifting, cutting down on my excess calories a little bit, I haven't really gained weight. Or nobody cares about gaining weight, gaining extra fat, where you just, you look and feel kind of sluggish. Once I get my hip fixed, then I'm going to go back to jogging 3 days a week, but not super long distance, because I feel like that burns muscle, and I don't want to get that kind of like skinny fat body. I want to stay kind of Sergeant Vegan-y.
Sergeant Vegan, I love it. Darius says, thank you for your service. You're awesome. I'm working with veterans and trying to introduce whole food, plant-based a little at a time. And a lot of other people like Jody are saying, thank you for your service and for your service to veterans and to people that are trying to be healthy and save the planet.
Well, thank you to them too. And definitely cutting out the word vegan when you think it's going to get in the way of the conversation is very smart. Whole food, plant-based, it sounds like some highfalutin, like what exactly are we talking about at first? Whereas vegan, if you're somebody who, has subscribed to, you're a manly man and you have to drive a truck, and if you're not, if there isn't a gun involved, it's not a good day, blah, 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 blah. Vegan is something that you've been told that you don't like and that isn't good. Even if you're a normal human being who would eat a banana or an apple, you've been told that you're supposed to look down on that.
Well, Sergeant Plant-Based doesn't sound as good though.
No. Me personally, I got vegan tattooed on my neck. I'm not trying to shy away from vegan. I don't think we should. But I myself, for years, was kind of like, why do we have to rebrand vegan as plant-based? Like, why are people trying to, change the way it is? I think more than anything, we have to acknowledge, hey, when something isn't working as is, if you have to kind of change direction and kind of hit a different, direction, then do it. Like if a frontward attack is not working, you want to come around the flank and attack from a different side. And that's all that, calling something plant-based is, or whole foods plant-based is basically, the healthiest way of eating. And I acknowledge that. I personally think it could be a little boring if we're cutting out salt and oil and stuff like that. I mean, you want to put as much flavor as you can into something if you're introducing it as plant-based. But at the same point, if I was, trying to counsel a loved one, a family member, who had just had a heart attack, what should I eat? Whole foods plant-based for sure. Make it the healthiest.
Great. Dog Mom says, how long have you been vegan? And did you feel Japan was more conducive to clean veganism?
Thank you very much for that question. So as of today, it's been 30 years and 3 months, 30 years and 3 months. I don't know. As far as Japan goes, Japan is amazing. Probably, arguably one of my favorite, definitely on my top three. If I was some kind of immortal from like a Netflix show, I would probably live hundreds of years in Japan. I just like it. My first degree is in Japanese, so it's just part of me. That being said, it's a very tricky place sometimes to be vegan, though veganism is gaining in popularity. They'll often like to make something that's 99.9% vegan and then put like a piece of meat on top of it, or like put what's called dashi, which is like flavoring, and then it'll be fish-based flavoring, or like a beef flavoring, or make tofu hamburger and it's basically 95% tofu, but it's also with ground chicken, or like, there's almost a bazillion things like that. That being said, did I eat very healthy there? For sure. I had a lot of soy protein, gluten stuff, or tofu and rice, and I just the food that I ate there that was vegan was amazing, and it was a very chill place to live. And Tokyo's not very chill, as you could guess. It has a very high New York-y kind of feel to it, but it was essentially a good time. So yeah,
great.
For sure.
Nikki says, what's going on with your hip? My daughter is a runner and is also having hip issues.
So two or three different things are going on. So a lot of the cartilage around, if you know what the hip looks like, and the femur ball socket kind of thing, I have mostly eroded all of the cartilage. So I'm like bone on bone in my one hip, and mostly rotten in the other. And so it's got to the point where I'm like shorter on one side too, and I have a wobble, which I, until recently, was able to kind of like compensate for, but now it's getting to the point of being ridiculous. And how it started, to be fair to the Army, it wasn't all the Army. I'm sure it was, I was a runner before I got in the military, and I took it upon myself to always, especially being vegan, to always be in the best shape I could, to be the best vegan ambassador I could be. On top of that, then the military, military's kind of an organization, you run all the time. Running is very important, those stats. So I obviously ran more. I would run not just on the 5 days a week when I was with my unit, but then I would run on a Saturday, or we would run with backpacks on, or it would be marching with, as a medic, I have a 30-pound medic bag, maybe 25, with my other gear, with my rifle. So I'm usually rolling with 60 pounds of gear. And then being with the 173rd, airborne operations, you're dropping with maybe 60, 70 pounds of gear. You're hitting like a bag of rocks on the ground, and all that extra stuff is just bringing you down, and just wore the heck out of my hip, and both hips. That's that's the thing that people don't think about. You can do a whole bunch of crazy, awesome stuff in your life, and will everybody have to pay for it? For sure. Everybody knows that. 97-year-old who still smokes 3 packs a day. There's always an outlier, but most people, if you do a whole bunch of crazy stuff, it'll catch up to you eventually. And it hasn't caught up to me. Luckily, though, and you could tell your daughter this, hip surgery for this allegedly is very quick and easy. It's almost like, changing a magazine quick. They told me that in a month or two after, like, obviously the surgical pain's worn off, you're almost at 100%. And of course, because I'm dumb as a bag of rocks myself, I will be back to running as soon as I can. Not to that extreme as I did before with the military, but I can't wait to get back to cardiovascular fitness too.
Great. Well, if people want more of you, where's the best place to connect?
Thank you for asking. So sergeantvegan.com, that's SGTvegan.com. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on the Facebook as Sergeant Vegan, and there's a whole bunch of older videos on Vegan Road Trip on YouTube. Maybe eventually I'll start posting there too, but it's just like, at a certain point, I'm sure you feel this too, Chef AJ. It's like how much is too much, and with working a full-time job and trying to put a band together, and trying to have a life and continue to write, doing, daily posts and posting a whole bunch of and I'm on and TikTok too. It's just like, how do I keep that balance? So my way is, I'm like, okay, I spend an hour a day on this stuff. Then I go about my daily business and try not to let it become a thing, and until I guess I figure out a way to monetize it, which I'm guessing now, since I've been vegan 30 years, I probably never figure out a way to really monetize it. I'm just going to do it out of passion for this and to push veganism. And hopefully one day, once we hit 25%, we can really start making some laws to make, this world a better place than, to force, companies to do stuff to limit climate change, to limit animal ag, to make prices for plant-based foods cheaper than animal-based foods, and really start making this change that I think we all need to see in our lifetime. Because if we don't, I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I want them to have a better world, or at least a not awful world.
Yeah. Terry says, how hard is it to be gluten-free in the military? She says her daughter applied to the Army Baylor Physical Therapy Program and wondering how challenging it is. She's not celiac, but suffers when eating gluten. That's like a medical exemption, right?
Yeah, they're not vegan, but they're gluten-free. Are they vegan too? Didn't say.
Can you answer, Terry? She didn't answer. That's, she didn't say whether her daughter was vegan or not. So
this is what I envision it being like. It'll be hard during basic training. If you just consider this like what it would be like being vegan, very similar. It'll be hard during basic training. She'll probably end up having some days where she's eating poorly, like me. It'll probably be a little better than when I went through. And generally speaking, for those who are thinking of, doing something kind of crazy, like joining the service like I did, but being vegan, generally speaking, the farther away from the infantry or from that kind of quote unquote cool guy stuff you do, the farther away from that, the easier it is to be vegan. I think there's some graph that you could come up with. So when I was in, for example, when I was in Fort Benning, Georgia, very difficult. When I was in Fort Sam Houston doing medic training, relatively easy. And they had veggie burgers in the chow hall. Why? Because you have what you call medics and other non-infantry things, soft skill MOS. But when I was back on a line unit, and then when I was deployed with artillery, we're back to being very difficult. So if she's in a physical fitness therapy program, we're not in a situation where we have like drill sergeants that are like, these are going to be like the shock troops. And we got to get them in ready for, I've had obviously, drill sergeants who their whole point was thinking like they got to get us ready for war. And when I was in the service, they were right. That's what they were doing. If you're getting ready to be in a physical therapy program, I would think it'd be relatively not awful. Now, we're not talking about vegan and we're talking about gluten-free. I think my thought would be have her talk to a doctor, as not in basic training, but the sooner that she can, to get an exemption from having to eat in any of the dining facilities and then be able to self-cater. And I have if there's a picture on my Instagram of the letter that I had the doctor write me, there's a picture in my book too. Basically, it says soldier cannot eat, any animal products, and animal products defined by blah, 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 and therefore needs to get separate rats, which in my case meant I have to have, access to a kitchen. I have to be put off post. So her training pipeline would probably be chiller than mine. So it'd be easier to be able to, find stuff that works for her food wise. And then as soon as she gets to her unit, she needs to have the doctor put something like that in, and it's no guarantee on how fast that would happen. But I think that would help, especially if you have, a doctor behind you writing that note.
You remember like 2 years ago, we did that show with a bunch of vegan veterans. There was like a whole bunch, now that I think of it, there's a lot of people that are veterans that are now vegan. You might be the only one that was vegan while in the military.
So a buddy of mine, George McQuaid, who I didn't know at the time, I think he's Planet Earth, weird spelling. He actually went vegan in Iraq. So his story is pretty interesting. I'm sure you would benefit from talking to him too. He was a medic. I think he knew somebody who was vegan and he did that. He's kind of an outlier because most people that I know don't change much while they're deployed. By deployed usually means, nowadays deploy means something different. But when I was being deployed meant you're going into harm's way. And most people don't become atheists in harm's way. Most people don't give up smoking, and most people don't go vegan. So I got to give him credit for that.
Are you allowed to smoke if you're in the military?
Real question?
Are you allowed to be a smoker? Because can you go and join the military if you smoke?
So basic training, they basically force you to quit smoking. And I don't know what it's like at the very minute, because I got out of the reserves. I got out of the military for good in 2006, went back in the reserves because I missed it in 2010 after I started going through, became a nursing assistant. But yeah, I mean, I remember, especially being deployed, everybody minus Sergeant Vegan was a smoker pretty much. And it's probably, it's just that kind of scenario where, everybody's usually very, tense. It's, you're in a dangerous spot, and it's usually often periods of boredom with craziness. So yeah, no, a lot of people were smokers.
Wow, that's so interesting. I Googled it, and it says the Pentagon prohibits troops from smoking, eating, or otherwise using marijuana and marijuana-derived products, including those with CBD or THC.
Smoking marijuana for sure will get you in very big trouble. I had a friend who, when I went through the board I was at first specialist vegan I went to the board to become sergeant vegan. And one of the guys who was supposed to go through the board with me with hashish, and he got busted down to a private. To be fair to his credit, instead of trying to protest or blubber or say it wasn't mine, he just was like, he got me.
Wow.
But yeah, smoking weed, other drugs, they'll for sure make a big deal about it. Smoking. Yeah, it's still people smoke.
Well, how can you be in active combat when you're smoking? I mean, that'd be very distracting.
Distracting, and it depends on what you're doing. Yeah, you could do a lot of things while still smoking. At least I saw the guys doing that. Are they lighting up every 5 seconds if things are going on? No, but as far as smoking, there's usually a smoke pit. There's usually, that's at least recent military. I'm sure, because smoking cigarettes with Gen Z is less of a thing. I'm sure as Gen Z takes over, less of Generation X and whatever boomers were in charge when I was in, as that moves out, the culture will change too. Just as I'm sure as more people are joining now, there'll be more tolerance toward people in the LGBTQ community. There'll be more tolerance toward, everybody. Oh, why? Because Gen Z is in a lot of ways, I think are going to be our greatest generation. They're the generation that we're hoping is going to bring all the change that, people like us have been wanting to see. It's going to be this generation. Yeah, you can definitely argue that computers and cell phones and stuff have made kids weak, but in my time, people were saying that too much watching TV or playing video games is going to be the same thing. So I think changes on the horizon. It's only going to be good.
Great. Well, wait, what are you drinking?
So this is my favorite LaCroix. This is the limoncello.
Nice.
I'm a big LaCroix fan, but really any sparkly, calorie-free, basically water. Anything that's going to trick my brain into thinking look at me, I'm drinking a soda because I popped the can. I love that, and black coffee.
Great. Well, Bill, it's been so fun catching up with you, and I hope everyone will check you out on social media, your website, and your books.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Chef AJ. This was awesome.
This was so fun. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back in 90 minutes when I have a bonus show today at 2 p.m. Plantiful Kiki is going to be talking about